Hi guys, it's Russ Diamond for Lieutenant Governor here. Teresa from Butler County sent me a bunch of great questions to answer, and I thought it would be a good idea just to put them on video so that everyone can hear what my answers are. So with that said, away we go.
Describe a time when you told the truth and were punished for it.
You know, I can't think of a time where I was actually punished for telling the truth alone, but look, like everyone else, I've made mistakes in my life. What I've always found is that when you come clean, when you make a mistake, people actually respect you in the long term. They might hold it against you, whatever you're telling the truth about, for a little bit. But in the end, what they do is they respect you for being truthful about the mistakes you make.
Have you ever lied under oath?
No, I have not. I believe when you put one hand on the good book and the other hand in the air and you swear, I believe that's very, very important. And it's important not to break that oath.
Do you believe in God, and do you believe yourself accountable to Him? If not, to whom do you believe yourself accountable?
I absolutely believe in God, Teresa, and I do believe I'm accountable to Him. I was raised in the United Methodist Church, and at 14 years old, I accepted Christ as my Lord and Savior. And, you know, I have a little saying that I keep in mind all the time, that we plan and God chuckles. Because God has a plan for every single one of us. All we have to do is let Him reveal it to us. I'm also accountable to the 64,000 people who I represent here in the 102nd District in Lebanon County. I'm accountable to my wife. And of course, I'm still accountable to my mother, who I feel like sits here on my shoulder all the time, telling me, Russell, do the right thing.
Describe a time when you declined money or financial gain for moral reasons.
Well, you know, Teresa, although I'm a four-term legislator, I had decades of experience in the private sector before going to Harrisburg. The vast majority of that experience was spent running my own audio-video production company, and part of that business was replicating compact discs and CD-ROMs for clients all over the world, not just here in the United States. So one time I got a job in and I did all the pre-production work on it and I got it ready to go to press. And just as a final step, I checked the master disc that they had sent me. And it turned out that that master disc contained very sexually explicit images. And I did not want to have my company associated with that, even though I would have made a ton of money on the job. So I called the folks up and I said, look, I just can't, I can't do this job because it's just not in my best interest to do it. I wouldn't feel right about doing it. So I returned the master disc. I returned all the money they had paid me up front, and I denied the job. And, you know, that was just one of those choices I made. And I made a lot of other choices like that in picking and choosing who I would take on as clients. Now, I'm not sure I would get away with that today because we've seen when businesses turn away business that, you know, violates their moral standards, well, people take them to court. So this was back in the early 2000s before all these court cases popped up like that. But that's one of the things I did when I was in business, to decline making money because of my moral values.
As Lieutenant Governor, you would be sworn to support and defend the constitutions of the United States and of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. What rights are protected by the First Amendment, and how would you defend them?
The First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution prohibits Congress from establishing a national religion, guarantees our freedom to worship, guarantees the right to free speech and the press, guarantees our right to assemble peaceably, and it guarantees our right to petition the government for redress of grievances. We've seen a lot of this play out over the last 2 years in Pennsylvania during COVID. You know, I've been really critical of Tom Wolf on a lot of fronts, but one thing I will give him credit for is that he always, in his executive orders, he made sure to state that they did not apply to places of worship, unlike the guy in California who tried to close down places of worship. So I'll give him credit for that. But you know, our free speech is totally under attack right now from big tech censorship. You know, these folks are hiding behind the federal coverage of Section 230, and I think they ought to be considered, you know, actors of the state when they do that. And the state cannot censor speech. Our freedom of assembly was severely limited under Tom Wolf's lockdowns. But it was so ironic that even under his own lockdown, he went out and violated it and shamefully marched with marchers in Harrisburg, including one who was right beside him that said, holding a sign that said, "Blue Lives Murder." That was so shameful that he violated his own lockdown policy to go out and march with people like that. And, petitioning our government for redress of grievances, that's actually how I kind of got my start in politics in Pennsylvania. If you remember back after the great pay raise of 2005, I started that group and I took it to the streets and we petitioned our government. The way we petitioned our government was by raising candidates for legislative seats. And we raised 113 candidates. 13 of them got elected to the House of Representatives. So we need to protect all those rights in the First Amendment. And, I've been doing that all through my legislative career, even before I was a legislator as a citizen. And let me mention one more thing. On the First Amendment right to free speech, I have a bill, House Bill 95, in Harrisburg, that would fight against these SLAPP suits. That's SLAPP. And that stands for Strategic Lawsuit Against Public Participation. And that's when you, as a common citizen, you go out and you might voice your opinion about this, big developer or some big business or something. And what they do is they threaten you with a defamation lawsuit. And, the legal fees themselves will just crush you. So the punishment is the process. And we need to pass a law in Pennsylvania that would make such SLAPP suits illegal and punishable so that, when you get sued with a SLAPP suit and it's frivolous, that the other side has to pay your legal fees. So that's what House Bill 95 will do, and that will help protect free speech in Pennsylvania.
What do you think is the purpose of government, and how does that differ from the purpose stated in our founding documents?
The primary purpose of government is to protect individual rights, just like our founding fathers said in the Declaration of Independence. We all have inalienable rights, and to secure those rights, governments are instituted among men. That was a vast departure from everything that came before it, where people thought that, kings were divinely blessed by God to rule over others. No. The founding fathers believed, and I believe, that individuals are the true sovereigns, and that sometimes they can band together in common cause to do things that one individual can't do to protect the general welfare of the nation, such as raising a military or a navy to protect our shores from foreign invaders, or to protect our borders from foreign invaders. Look, I believe squarely that individual rights are the greatest thing that were ever recognized in American history. And we need government to remember that its primary duty is to protect those rights.
What is your opinion of misuse of taxpayer money? As an example, the gasoline tax.
I abhor the misuse of tax money. On the gasoline tax, you're probably talking about that $4.2 billion that was siphoned off of that to pay for state police coverage. That's a decision that's made by Tom Wolf. He's the chief executive. And he just doesn't do that on the gas tax. He's done that in other areas as well. Almost every year of his tenure in Harrisburg, he's pilfered off an extra almost $1 billion in welfare money, beyond what we appropriated in the General Assembly. And all that does is it builds expectations that we will spend that much money the next year, and on and on and on. The real cure is to elect a Republican governor and lieutenant governor, that's me, to make that stop.
What do you know about RGGI? What would you do about RGGI? Do you see any conflict with RGGI and the U.S. Constitution? Do you see anything wrong with the governor moving forward with RGGI, despite legislative opposition?
What you're talking about here is the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. This is a multi-state compact that the Wolf administration unilaterally, without legislative approval, entered Pennsylvania into. It's kind of a cap and trade thing, a carbon tax thing, whatever you want to call it. Essentially, this is a tax on your energy usage at your home and your business. Pennsylvania Constitution forbids the state from delegating taxing authority to any unelected board or commission. I disagree with this policy. I voted against this policy. We did a resolution to reject it, but the Wolf administration is going ahead with it. And here's the thing. Josh Shapiro, who wants to be the governor of Pennsylvania, he wants to play both sides of the fence here. He's being coy about it. He said, I don't know if I support it. But then after the governor supported it, he said, okay, it's a great idea. Look, if you want to stop this sort of thing from happening, there is one thing to do. That is to elect a Republican governor and a Republican lieutenant governor. Okay? So we're going to stop this kind of malarkey from happening. Look, I'm not against multi-state compacts. And in fact, the Constitution itself was a multi-state compact. And we do other ones here in Pennsylvania, Susquehanna River Basin Commission. When we have a bridge that goes from Pennsylvania to another state, we have those bridge commissions. Sometimes it's necessary to do an interstate compact. And again, the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were all multi-state compacts. But for this purpose, to charge an extra tax on energy for your home and your business, I wholeheartedly disagree.
How have you defended the Second Amendment? How would you defend the Second Amendment as lieutenant governor?
During my 4 terms in the legislature, I have been a stalwart member of the Second Amendment caucus. And what that means is, for every bill that came up that strengthened or protected our right to bear arms here in Pennsylvania under Article 1, Section 21, I have fully supported and co-sponsored. Every bill that came up that threatened our right to bear arms in Pennsylvania, I have voted against and have refused to help get out of committee. Look, as a supporter of the right to bear arms in Pennsylvania, I think it's important that you take the votes that count. A lot of people can go out and talk the talk, but I have walked the walk and I have the record to prove it. As lieutenant governor, you don't have a lot of legislative authority, but what you can do as president of the Senate is you can vote on procedural matters, whether you just shoot something down or not. So I could do that as president of the Senate. And of course, as lieutenant governor, you have to be prepared to step into the governorship if some tragedy occurs and, God forbid, the governor passes away. So as governor, if I was lieutenant governor, if I had to move in the governorship, I would absolutely never sign any bill that strips you of the right or reduces your right to keep and bear arms in Pennsylvania, because I fully believe in Article 1, Section 21, which is far better language than the Second Amendment.
Would you classify yourself as a Federalist or an anti-Federalist?
Teresa, of all the questions you gave me, this is probably my favorite. And I do consider myself an anti-Federalist. And you have to go back to the 1780s when the Constitution was being, bandied about and debated to understand what Federalists and anti-Federalists are. On the Federalist side, you had people who wanted a strong central national government. There's people like Alexander Hamilton. On the other side were the anti-Federalists, and they wanted more power in the people. They wanted a small d democratic society where the people had most of the power and it was all local control, and the federal government then would serve a very, very small, limited role in people's lives. And that's what I am. I believe, that government ought to be, spread out to the people and control ought to be local. So I consider myself an anti-federalist. I don't think a lot of people realize it, but the Federalist versus anti-Federalist battle took place here in Pennsylvania as well. The 1776 original Pennsylvania Constitution was very much an anti-Federalist document in that it tried to keep all the power in the hands of the individuals, the sovereign people. In fact, it included a body called the Council of Censors, whose job was, every 7 years, to create a report on whether the branches of government actually upheld the Constitution itself. Here's the thing. The first time it issued a report, it was a scathing report against the General Assembly at the time. But at the same time, the Federalists in Pennsylvania, it's kind of the moneyed establishment, they kind of, started a movement, and they kind of took over the government of Pennsylvania. And what they did was this. In 1790, the General Assembly wrote an entirely new constitution and ratified it without going to the people, unlike what we have to do today. We have to go to the people to ratify any kind of constitutional amendment. But they ratified it all by themselves, without any authority to do so, and created a brand new constitution in Pennsylvania in 1791. The fun fact here is that brand new constitution in Pennsylvania for 1791, guess what it did? It eliminated the Council of Censors, which was so critical of all the other branches of government. So the Federalist versus anti-Federalist battle, it took place on a national scale, and it took place right here in Pennsylvania. I do consider myself more of an anti-Federalist. I don't believe in centralized power, big government, a strong national power, or even a strong state power. I believe local control is probably the best thing ever.
Are you familiar with ESG numbers, and what is your position on using them for lending?
ESG is fast becoming a really hot topic of late. ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. And what happens is companies are assigned a score based on, how they treat their employees, how they treat the environment, how, socially adept they are, and that sort of thing. And look, when it comes to lending, if you're borrowing money from some private institution somewhere, that private institution is free to judge you based on whatever criteria they want, whether it's sustainability, whether it's, your credit history, that sort of thing. But here's the thing. There's no bank in America that's not connected somehow to the federal government. So now we have government using these ESG scores to potentially determine the interest rate for any business's loan. And if you're a government that doesn't want to have any fossil fuels whatsoever, guess what? The fossil fuel companies are going to be given a very, very bad ESG score. It's insidious. It's almost as insidious as critical race theory as it's been trickling down into our public schools. So when it comes to lending, look, there are really no private actors. Hey, unless you're going out to a loan shark, somewhere. But there are really no private actors in lending. So we have to be very cautious about this. And we have to be very careful that the insidiousness of the woke crowd is not going to be involved in determining the economic future of the United States of America.
To what form of government do you have allegiance?
This is an easy one. The Republican form of government, where we elect members of the General Assembly to actually make the laws, where the executive branch executes the laws, and when the judicial branch only interprets the laws and doesn't try to make laws. That is the Republican form of government. We're guaranteed it by the United States Constitution, and I firmly have allegiance to it.
What are your thoughts and opinions about election reform? For example, machines versus ballots.
I have some very strong thoughts and opinions on election reform in Pennsylvania. And just to give you a basis of where I come from on this whole election integrity issue, let me roll back the calendar to September 2020, when I and 7 other legislators, along with a couple other folks, we actually sued Philadelphia, Delaware County, and Center County in Pennsylvania to stop the inflow of the Zuckerbucks. That was Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook, CTCL, filtering millions of dollars into those counties in Pennsylvania, which essentially turned out to be a get out the vote effort for Joe Biden. This is private money funding the actual administration of elections in certain counties in Pennsylvania. We filed suit to stop it. Unfortunately, the courts threw it out, and it went ahead, and you saw what happened. After the election itself, I got down in the weeds with a number of other legislators and people on the outside who cared about this issue. And, we did, with my other legislative colleagues, we did 25 separate efforts, whether it was letters to Congress, whether it was petitions to our own leadership, whether it was a letter to the Attorney General, Josh Shapiro, who, by the way, did nothing. We also put in a couple of resolutions to call into question the certification of the statewide vote in Pennsylvania. All in all, it was 25 separate legislative efforts. And I, at the end of it, penned a letter on behalf of a lot of my colleagues, and that letter was to Vice President Mike Pence before July 6th when they certified the electoral vote. So it went to Mike Pence, it went to the Archivist of the United States. Then after Joe Biden was sworn in and it was all done, we got down to work in the House State Government Committee, of which I'm a member. We held about a dozen different hearings. We heard tons of testimony from tons of witnesses, and that helped us form the basis of House Bill 1300, which was an election reform bill, which we sent to Tom Wolf, and of course, he then vetoed it, because he vetoes all good ideas. And now, but you really asked, your first part of your question was about machines versus ballots. Look, I am now, after 2 years of this baloney, I am now fully in the camp of one of my friends calls vote Amish. I believe we need to vote with all paper ballots, marked by hand, counted by human beings, at the precinct level by the end of Election Day. I mean, I'm serious. I don't trust any of these machines anymore, and I think we ought to just go back to the old-fashioned way and vote Amish. It worked for so many years. I think it can work again for us.
What about voter ID?
What about voter ID? I absolutely support voter ID when every person shows up at their polling place to vote, or providing a copy of that photo ID when they vote absentee in Pennsylvania. Look, we show ID for everything else in the world. We have to show ID to buy cough syrup. We have to show ID to cash a check. We have to show ID to get a COVID-19 vaccination. And by golly, at the Democratic National Convention a few years back, you had to show ID to get in. None of it's racist. None of it hurts poor people. But for some reason, voter ID somehow is racist, and it hurts poor people. It's a ridiculous notion. And look, House Bill 1300, we offered to provide every voter in Pennsylvania with a piece of ID that they could show to prove that they are who they are when they show up to vote. I support voter ID 100%.
And drop boxes?
Drop boxes were never authorized by Act 77 when we passed it. When we created no excuse mail-in voting, we did not allow for drop boxes. They were not authorized by the law. A few counties invented these things all on their own without any authorization of law. And we in the General Assembly ended up trying to chase that thing and get ahead of it. And of course, Wolf vetoed every effort for us to do that.
Tell us about Act 77.
I could tell you all about Act 77, but what I would like you to do first is to go to my blog and read what I've written about it. You go to my blog at www.russdiamond.vote and look for the blog post that's called About That Act 77 Court Ruling, because it's all about the Commonwealth Court's recent ruling. And by the way, we are awaiting the Supreme Court to actually hear that case again on appeal from the Wolf administration. But there's a lot of things about Act 77 you should know. First of all, it was partly our attempt to fund the counties to purchase new voting machines, which was required because Tom Wolf unilaterally entered into a settlement with the Jill Stein 2006 presidential campaign after they sued Pennsylvania. He entered into a settlement and decertified every single voting machine in Pennsylvania. That was at an expense of $150 million to our counties. We were trying to get $90 million in funding to our counties. That was our second attempt. Act 77 was our second attempt. The first attempt we did, we sent it to the governor, and he, of course, vetoed it. Act 77, when we were working on that bill and working to move it through the House, I read the Constitution. There is no specific language in the Constitution prohibiting another method of voting other than in person and absentee balloting. Unfortunately, no one ever told us about these two precedent-setting Supreme Court rulings from 1862 and 1924. Had I known about them, I would have never voted for Act 77. In retrospect, that was the only vote in my entire 7 years in Harrisburg that I regret, because I was not fully informed. And here's the thing. As a rank-and-file state representative, I do not have legal staff that works directly for me. I wish I did, because I would love to know some of the legal basis of this. I have to rely on other legal staff that we as a caucus share. And we just weren't informed that those two precedent-setting Supreme Court rulings were in place. So the Commonwealth Court's ruling was beautiful. I mean, it's one of the most beautiful judicial opinions I've ever read from a Pennsylvania court. And by all rights, the Supreme Court should uphold it. Here's the thing. Supreme Court's kind of in a pickle now, because are they going to go against their own 150-year-old precedent? Because if they do, they look like nothing but political animals. And look, they want to be politicians. I think we can treat them like politicians by making them run in contested elections for re-election, maybe shortening their terms from 10 years to maybe 4 or 6. And hey, let's create judicial districts where they have to actually answer to a constituency. They want to be politicians. They want to act like politicians. Let's treat them like politicians. But here's the thing. We have to be prepared for the Supreme Court ruling either way. And I am. I have House Bill 1717. Here's what House Bill 1717 will do. It will codify those Supreme Court precedents from 150 years ago and from 1924 into the Constitution. So here's the beautiful thing. With House Bill 1717, we can win either way. If the Supreme Court upholds the Commonwealth Court ruling that Act 77 was unconstitutional, my bill, House Bill 1717, will codify that into the Constitution. It should have been done after the 1862 ruling. It should have been done after the 1924 ruling, but nobody ever did it. If the Supreme Court overturns the Commonwealth Court's ruling, not only do they look like complete and total political animals, but now we have House Bill 1717 as a constitutional amendment where those of us who want to dump no-excuse mail-in voting, we will have something to rally behind, a bill that we can get through the General Assembly and put on the ballot and not have to worry about any governor vetoing it. That's the beauty about constitutional amendments. They're a deal between the General Assembly and the people, and the governor has no say in it. So with House Bill 1717, no matter what the Supreme Court rules, we will have a vehicle by which we can make those two methods of voting, in-person voting, and the standard absentee ballot system, the law of the land forever and ever in Pennsylvania, constitutionally sound. One last point on Act 77. If you are one of those people who believes Act 77 is fully responsible for President Trump losing the presidency, you have to think about it a little bit further. First of all, Pennsylvania was not entirely responsible for President Trump losing the Electoral College. Second of all, if you think during COVID that the Supreme Court, Tom Wolf, Kathy Bookvar at the Department of State, and these certain county election officials wouldn't have taken equal advantage of our regular absentee voting process and blown through all that security as well, just like they did with no excuse mail-in voting, you're kidding yourself. It's exactly what happened in other states. We just had mail-in voting for them to do it with here in Pennsylvania. If we wouldn't have had no excuse mail-in voting, they certainly would have used the absentee ballot system for the exact same purpose during COVID. And here's the thing. I have heard already that Democrats are already gearing up to encourage people to vote by absentee because there's a distinct possibility that mail-in voting won't be around in 2022. So the Democrats are looking to do what I just said they would have done anyways during the presidential election in 2020. Folks, Act 77, It was a bad law. It was the only vote I've ever made in Harrisburg that I regret. The Supreme Court absolutely should uphold the Commonwealth Court's ruling and abide by their own 150-year-old precedent. But as of this taping, it remains to be seen what the Supreme Court does. It's really in their hands. Do they want to be seen as political animals and then subsequently treated as politicians by the General Assembly? Or do they want to uphold the law? It's a great question.
How have you supported pro-life legislation and agendas?
Ever since I was first elected to the House of Representatives in 2014, I've been a member of the Pro-Life Caucus. Folks, life begins at conception. Every life is precious, and I believe, as I said earlier, God has a plan for every single human life before they're even in the womb. I believe that with all my heart. I believe it to be true. And frankly, abortion is wrong, and abortion is not health care. Folks, a lot of people can say what they're going to do as far as pro-life issues go. I can tell you what I've done, all right? Look, the best indicator of what I'm going to do is what I've already done. I've been 100% pro-life voting record in my term at the House of Representatives, to include last year, I voted to defund the University of Pittsburgh because of their horrific research that they're doing using aborted fetal tissue. It is absolutely horrendous. You really don't want me to go into the details, but it's horrendous. And I'm sure some of you have seen it. Also, I think it was 2019, when we ran the Down syndrome bill, then Speaker of the House, Mike Turzai, asked me to get up on the floor and to tell my family's story about my Aunt Shirley, who had only then recently passed away. But she was 82 years old when she passed away. She had severe mental difficulties, severe physical difficulties. But you know what? Aunt Shirley, she taught us the real meaning of pure love and pure joy. She added to our family in ways that you could never imagine. And that's the reason that I support all life, from conception till natural death. Folks, I'm 100% pro-life. Other people can promise it. I can prove it.
What is your stance on legalized marijuana?
I'm opposed to further legalization of marijuana in Pennsylvania at this time. And here's why. Look, first of all, we can have a philosophical discussion about the differences between, say, cannabis and alcohol and the kind of effects and impacts they have on families and the social fabric of our society. And I think that's a whole great conversation to have. And look, I'm kind of agnostic when it comes to that philosophical issue. But here's the thing about legalizing it, about the government's involvement of it. I'm opposed to it right now on expanding it. And here's why. Look, I'll be honest with you. I had the bill that brought industrial hemp back to Pennsylvania. It wasn't in production, and I had the bill that brought it back to production. That is going to be a $1 billion industry when it matures. It's going to be good for farmers, it's going to be good for the environment, it's going to be good for manufacturing, and it will be a $1 billion industry when the industry matures. I was also very instrumental, and I did this as a freshman legislator, very instrumental in getting the medical marijuana program online here in Pennsylvania. We got that through the House of Representatives after it came over to the Senate. Look, one of my proudest moments as a legislator was seeing the results of my work of that. Look, I had the amendment on the floor, which allowed this to be a treatment for children with autism. And a lot of people criticized me for it at the time. But you know what? A couple months after that program came online, I heard from a father who had 2 children with severe autism. They were nonverbal. And within weeks of starting being treated by medical marijuana, these kids became verbal, they started playing, they started acting like normal children. And I've heard many, many other stories like that since then. And quite frankly, folks, if I never, ever accomplish anything else in my legislative career, that is enough. When you can touch a family's life in a way like that, that improves it so much, I mean, it is awe-inspiring. So I feel good about those things I did. But here's the thing. The medical marijuana industry and the Department of Health, I believe, have not held up their end of the bargain on this. There are significant problems with the medical marijuana program, both from a governmental standpoint and an industry standpoint. One of the biggest ones, and this is one of my biggest disappointments with the medical marijuana program, is that the crown jewel of that bill was its Section 20 clinical research program, which would have actually brought Pennsylvania to the forefront and made it a world leader in actual clinical research, which is sorely lacking on this topic. But it all got caught up in court because some people, look, it came down to money. People were fighting over money and the licenses for the clinical research thing. And the clinical research never got off the ground. We have yet to see significant results that I can go and take and share with my constituents. Now, there is some research going on, but it's not nearly as much as it could be. And I am not about to reward that industry with further legalization in any sort, whether it means more medical marijuana licenses, whether it means recreational use. I'm not about to legally reward that industry or the Department of Health, which, by the way, is doing a horrific job in some areas, in some aspects of managing this program. Folks, they've let us down. And until they get their act together, I'm not even willing to entertain that philosophical discussion that we talked about earlier, between cannabis and alcohol and the impacts it has on families and the fabric of our society. So for me, right now, I'm kind of a hard no, because I want the industry and the Department of Health to live up to the expectations we set for them when we brought medical marijuana to Pennsylvania. So there you have it, folks. Teresa asked a lot of really great questions, and I was more than happy to put the answers together in this video format so that you all could know the answers as well. Folks, if you have questions about any of the hot topics of the day, I'm going to ask you to go to www.russdiamond.vote, not .org, not .com, not .net, but russdiamond.vote. And if you scroll down to the first page, I have a lot of icons there, and you just click on those icons, and you can read my positions on the hot topics of the day. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me by email at campaign@russdiamond.vote, and I will be happy to make every effort to personally answer your questions. Folks, in these statewide races, it's really important that you do your homework on all the statewide candidates, because just like in life and in business, in politics, getting anything positive done always starts with having some sort of personal connection to the people you're dealing with. And that's what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to let you get to know me a little bit better, because without that personal connection, it's really hard to determine, well, do you want to vote for this guy? You want to vote for that person? I'm trying to get you to know me so that you can be comfortable casting your vote on May 17th for Russ Diamond for Lieutenant Governor. It's all about building relationships. Just a couple weeks ago, I put out a music video. It's not a campaign ad or anything like that. It's a song I wrote in 2010 that I've updated the lyrics to for 2022. But I didn't touch the lyrics in the chorus, because those lyrics are really what I'm talking about here, which is, here's the lyrics. It's, we are free to make things right. We are free to get through the darkest night. We are free to start anew. And it all begins with me talking to you. Have a great day, folks. God bless you. God bless the Commonwealth. And God bless the United States of America.